And his first piece is a story called Return of the Dream Girl. He lay face down, unwilling to move in the darkness about him. He wanted desperately to twist into a fetal position, but had not even the motivation to do so. Nothing he had done seemed to matter anymore. All efforts had been crushed and all seemed lost. Nothing to do but to close one's eyes and wail. He felt something push against his neck. A jab, a nudge, or shove. Decided to ignore it, thinking he was hallucinating. Hey, not from his mouth. But the sensation continued, increasingly forceful but never violent. Rather benevolent authority this was, but again this was hardly an officer's jackboot pouching on his neck. He turned to see what little he could. The glint of patent leather and a bit of metallic trim along the heel. He saw a woman's foot, clad in a black stiletto, peeking from what appeared to be a jet black evening gown that went down to just below her ankle. From what he could see at the heel, he could tell it was at least 5 inches. Before he could grasp this, she tucked her foot under his head and pushed it upwards, forcing him to look up at her. Remember me, you had me up on your bedroom wall in many daydreams? Even, he gasped involuntarily at another jab, this time in his crotch. In a few wet dreams. Don't worry, she went on, I'm not here to hurt you, tease you a little, but you did crave this once upon a time, remember? He had to admit he still did. He felt himself aroused as her caress of his genital area. Though her shoe was potentially dangerous, she was making sure not to hurt him. Taking action, he kissed the toe of her left foot and ran his hands along it, massaging the sinews, while her right foot massaged the pubic area. Though still very dark, he had no trouble locating anything. Indeed, the only thing lost was his melancholia. She kicked his neck up, forcing him to shut up, and sat herself down to face him. Remember, all is not as lawless as seems. Should you ever feel it is, she wrapped her arms around him and embraced him. Just recall me, my fan. He returned her embrace, relieved by her presence. He woke up to a new morning, fully alert, and out of the depression he had been in when he retired last night. Things had to start anew, he realized. About to rise, he looked to his right and was shocked at the sight of a black stiletto next to his face. Sitting up to fathom that, he noticed there was something under his blanket between his legs. Pushing him aside, he saw another stiletto, patent leather, 4-inch heel. Looking closely, he realized they were even the same size as hers. He would not be depressed for quite some time. The bodyguard's reaction. You've said this once too often, she hissed as she took him down to the floor. Now I'll just have to teach you a thing or two about watching what you say and do. And he felt the impact of her firm and taut bulk impact with his own, like a lioness atop her prey who mounts a most feeble struggle. This was no joke or bluff, he well knew. This woman was deadly serious. She blocked all attempts at escape as she forced him down on his back so he could face her to remind him what a force of nature she was. Let's see how you are now, she panted as her form heaved with satisfied passion. What do you think of me and mine now that I've got you at my mercy? He knew he had quite a reply to make, and he could not help but admire her passion. Yet one who reads this may well wonder whether it be born of contempt, or duty, or admiration, or even love. He knows, she knows, but you can draw your own conclusion. Muscle Mole versus a hooded culprit. She stood as though she was a mobile bronze statue, yet much more alluring and far more dangerous. Dark, kinky hairs sprouting from scalp to shoulders and muscles abound from head to sculpture toe. The hungry breast threatened to burst from the top. The hooded culprit knows he is cooked down inside and seriously wishes just now he's left well alone. But the reckoning has begun and only a ritual remains. He knows better than to confront direct, so he opts for the flee part of the equation. But that proves just as futile as the fight would have been, and ironic it is that the fight comes anyway. Justice must prevail, and Muscle Mole is her enforcer. It is not long for the hooded culprit is subdued, yet continues to struggle against her, he persists, as he is intoxicated by the sensation, the motion, and heat of her rock-hard musculature. And truth be told, she too is enthralled. If predator she is not out to kill, only to subdue and quell the peril of her foe. And neither is at all prepared for what comes next, as her genitals took a page from the show about the minds. Oh, but for the rules of law and justice, such a meeting could have truly begat something big. In any case, the battle is done. The hooded culprit is captured and sent to serve time. And the one thing giving him hesitation of repentance is the dream of facing Muscle Mole yet again. And meantime, somewhere in her off-time, Muscle Mole herself fantasizes to meet with the hooded culprit. Just one more. close with a segment from the novel, in which is after the person as the breed has suffered a very harsh and humiliating rejection. As the closing part of chapter 26. There was a subtle rise to his voice that unnerved Florence, for it seemed to be a signal that it was a violent calm right before something of cataclysmic magnitude. She could tell that something was about to explode. The best thing she could do at this point, however, was to ready herself. Better to let it occur here where she might be able to somehow contain it with minimum risk to breathe than outside where most would not be so forbearing. The greatest risk would be to herself. She steeled herself, praying that it would not prove to be beyond her capabilities, and knowing innately that this was an upcoming baptism of fire for Miss Dragonheel. I should be used to this by now, Breed continued, his voice becoming more broken and higher toned in places. Why don't I enjoy this? I should be enjoying this. I should be cheerful. Yes, do it again. Hit me again. I love it, love it, love it. Breed, don't do this to yourself, Florence pleaded, but she was all too aware that it was about to begin. Oh, no one around, he inquired as if nobody else was in the room. Well, then I'll do it myself. Exploding to his full size, he swung his arms and with all kinds of frenzy began to batter himself with rapid fire incessancy. Breed, stop! Florence shrieked, now quite frightened for him, and rushed to him. But why not just a fist, he cried. Let us try the old throw against the wall. He started to do just that, but Florence reached and intercepted him. Before she could secure herself, however, he shoved her away and completed his collision with the wall. Undeterred, Florence rebounded and grasped Breed again, this time with a plan. Knowing she would not prevail in a standing battle, she swiftly forced Breed's leg out from under him with her own, forcing him off balance and causing him to topple, then embraced them fast as the momentum sent both to the floor, where the odds would be more even. Breed attempted to pry himself loose and succeeded briefly, but before he could begin to rise, Florence had pounced once more upon him and, wrapping her arms and legs around him, held on for life, riding out his furious lunges and resistance. Florence held, squeezed, and embraced as though she were subduing a wild boar. She felt his shoes slap off one foot, but now was no time to worry about that. There was an urgency to deal with. To her surprise, she found she was managing to restrain Breed without any significant violence. He was jerking and pushing and flailing insanely, but was unable to shake her off him. It was as though Miss Dragonheel had emerged and given her the strength and stamina she needed to keep this person, who was much larger and stronger than herself, at bay and under control. She could handle this human storm, and also to utter surprise, she found herself having to suppress a bit of lust forming from all the physical contact with him as he twisted, squirmed against her body and limbs. Foolish woman, you, this man snapping and erupting like Mount St. Helens, and you're lusting after him. Don't you know his life and yours are at stake? But she had to admit that with a bit of effort, he'd be quite the catch. Let me go, he cried. I don't want or need of your help or anyone's, frankly, kid, she quipped. You need some loving. Bianca was right, he moaned in frustration. I am a pathetic fool. Let me fulfill everyone's shush. You're fancying me as your heroine, Miss Dragonheel, all this time, and now I'm fulfilling the part. She clasped his chin and forced him to look at her. It's no use, he said, trying to resist. Breed, if you keep fighting me instead of listening, I'm not going to let you up. She turned his head to face her. You're not a fool, she said in a softer, reassuring tone, and you're sure as hell not worthless or pathetic. Listen, no fool could have fascinated me with as you have both as a person and artist, but my art's gone. Not completely, not at all, she said. I went by the house and managed to gather some of it. It's in my glove compartment now. I'll be honest, Breed, a lot of it is roughed up and I couldn't save it all, but you may still be able to salvage. And let me say this, Hamilton, even if all of it had been lost, your art is still not destroyed. Breed's face turned incredulous through his pain. You saved my work, but is that not what a heroine's for? She smiled wickedly, noting that he had calmed quite remarkably. Well, since you're back to your senses, I think I can release you. She began to ready herself to rise, but he grasped her arm. Please, he said, almost in a whisper, stay just a little longer. Unable to say any more, he pulled her towards him and held her tightly, tears streaming down his cheeks. Very well, she complied, but you're lucky you didn't cast me as a nun. For a long while they held each other close, without words. Could this be mother love? Florence asked herself about what she was feeling, or is it a slightly more risque version of such?